Bien, bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. We're very happy to be with you and to see so many of you here for this conference on AI. How can we go beyond fiction and how can AI be a solution? How do we overcome our fears to develop a desirable AI? And I would like to begin this roundtable with a quick story, because if you can see this tent, in Europe and across France, there have been the same types of tents where people, the bosses of the majors, have come together to give diplomas to the graduates. And everyone was wolf whistling at them when they talked about AI. And de Brannon has just written a book called Stop the Machines, talking about the rising anti-tech movement. Another very striking figure in the last Ipsos so 2/3 of citizens used AI at least once during the year. This was multiplied by 4 in 2 years. And this is the paradox, because as the citizens use it, they themselves say that those that use it the most, it generates far more hope and promises in their daily life. So how can we solve this paradox? How can we go beyond our fears? How can we not focus just on the question of why AI, but how to develop a desirable AI for the future that will be useful in our schools, in our companies, in our democracies. So to answer this question of desirability and how to get there, we are lucky enough to have an exceptional panel here who will be talking to you about how AI can improve productivity whilst improving social cohesion, how we can have a European AI development pathway, how AI can also weigh on democracy, but yet be a solution. And we could not hope for better than to have such well-known representatives of the public and private sector to answer these questions. And we will be introducing them to you now. Thank you very much, Jan. I'm director of the editorial panel of Provence. I'm happy to welcome the 5 guests. Clara Chapaz, thank you for being with us today. You're ambassadors for digital technology and artificial intelligence. For a long time you were state secretary and in charge of these subjects. Besides you is Valerio Dildat, vice president of Universe. You have a platform which helps companies to manage energy and database analysis thanks to AI technology, and you will come back to this later. Arno Golgloff, you are president of KR. Thank you for being with us also. You support many companies in their transformation strategy for their model. Later on, you can say what your opinion is on artificial intelligence. And then we have François Robinet in charge of AVP. You are the founding managing partner of AVP. It's an international investment platform that invests in technological high-growth companies in Europe and in North America. And Barbara Sessa, thank you for being with us today. You're the director of Mastercard. You each have between 3 and 4 minutes, because it's the first day of the rencontre here, of the rencontre économique d'Aix, to shed your light on this question of artificial intelligence, sovereignty of companies, and we will debate together on this question before leaving the floor to the audience and many questions. Clara Chapaz, over to you. Thank you. What you're doing is very good for me, because I thought we had a timer and it doesn't seem to be starting up, so I might maybe have to go over time, but it won't be voluntary, so please just wave at me. Yeah, don't worry. We're delighted to be with you today to talk about a subject that affects us all in our daily lives, and you very well introduced the subject of today's conference of artificial intelligence, from fiction to transformation. I think that was the title. So I would like to begin. I think the theme of this conference is progress. So through this notion of progress, yes, on one hand, we have transformation that affects everything: scientific research, tailoring of education, the way in which we find information, medical progress. Today, it's no longer a question of fiction. We can concretely see how doctors can save time, how scientists can find anti-cancer drugs, which before used to take several decades to develop. And also, we have this fear. And this fear is normal because it is the result of the Industrial Revolution, which is of a scale that we've never seen before because it affects all of these domains. And the speed at which this revolution is coming about. And it took 20 years for one French person out of two to have a laptop at home or a computer at home. And most people now use artificial intelligence on a daily basis, and that only took 2 years, so 20 years, 2 years. So the speed of this transformation gives rise to a certain concern. But behind this fear, I think that in my role as an ambassador, what I'm interested in, what I find fascinating, is this question of controlling this progress. Because the biggest transformations that we're seeing, I believe, it's not really the potential of AI itself, but it is the fact that for the very first time, at the global scale, we are aware that digital technology is not a technical subject, a question of piping that links together different expertises in a company. And of course, but it is a very strategic geopolitical subject. It is a question of power. And for the very first time, we are becoming aware that when we have a technology which allows our hospitals and schools to operate and access to information, and that we're in a fragmented, uncertain world, because that's the theme of today, there can be powers that from one day to the next say that they no longer want to give access to this technology, and therefore arises the question not only of how we cooperate at the international level to ensure that we push this technology towards progress, but above all, how we build our own capacities. Because in a fragmented world, in order to be respected, in order to guide the progress where we want to go, it is above all a question of having our own tools, and this notion of digital sovereignty has never been as present, and it's essential in the subject of today. Thank you very much, Clara Chapaz. We will come back to you in a moment when we talk about all of these subjects. Valeria, the floor is yours. You have 3 or 4 minutes to present your arguments and ideas before we debate. Thank you, Olivier. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I will talk to you about physical AI. We're talking about prefixation. When we talk about a physical question, we're talking about concrete things, and AI is involved in this world. I have the pleasure of managing Universe, a global company of physical AI, which comes from the world of energy. In this platform today, we monitor, we control, and we orchestrate about more than 1 terawatt of power installed in renewable energies across the world. That makes about 20% of renewable energies installed across the world. And from this AI applied to the world of energy, we have disseminated this to other environments such as logistics, manufacturing, data centers that need sovereignty, and infrastructure such as hospitals and hotels, and the electrification of usages. Air conditioning. A lot of people talk about this these days. These are part of the assets that can be optimized thanks to AI. So we were talking about perfection. It must be as visible and as tangible as possible. So faced with these questions of sovereignty, AI needs energy. Energy sovereignty is the first way of creating links, because we need energy for the data centers to operate. And so for a long time in the world of energy, we steered energy generation. Consumption had its behavior, and we adjusted the power that we generated, the energy generated. But today that's not sufficient. The fact of having a lot more energy demand and electrification and a lot more renewable energies, which are less predictable, we need to manage demand. And this can be done through aggregation, which means aggregating a lot of different fridges, radiators, air conditioners of a big house and in public buildings and industrial buildings in order to adjust the dynamics to fit demand and therefore to optimize supply and demand of energy. This is key in energy systems such as that of France and all European countries in order to continue to operate and not over-invest in infrastructures. And this requires physical links. With our platform, we support aggregators in the public domain, such as Voltalis. That's a French scale-up which is now working at an international level. And we integrate these tens of thousands of physical assets on the platform in order to manage them down to the minute. And this is where we must take very fast and diffuse decisions. And this is where AI is essential, because this optimization can only be done dynamically with real-time links to the physical assets, always in a controlled manner, of course. Another example is in the world of logistics. We talk a lot about the renewal of fleets of trucks and vans that deliver shopping in the shops in French cities. But it's not a problem of switching a diesel truck to an electrical truck. Today, the business cases work on this type of application. The constraint is the depot. When all of the trucks go back to the depot and they reconnect to charge up, in many European countries, there is not enough electricity on the grid to be able to do this. And so this prevents the electrification of our fleets. And this is where, thanks to a platform, an AI physical platform such as I'm speaking of, we can set up solar panels and batteries to collect and store the energy during the day and to recharge the trucks in the evening. And it is this entire ecosystem in the warehouses that we can manage in terms of electricity. So we don't have much time, but as an Italian, you know, I could go on forever, but you only have a minute. So in the data centers, the process is the same. Well, we are talking about this. We want France and other countries in Europe to be sovereign and to own their data centers. So the problem is energy, equipping the data centers with sources of renewable energy and to be able to manage the demand and the location of all of the demands that we have in ChatGPT with the different data centers. It allows us to optimize this demand and also to optimize the supply of renewable energies to this data center, which will allow Europe to be increasingly sovereign without taking the electricity and diverting it away from other needs, such as in industry and households, which would push up the prices. Thank you, Arnaud Gongloff, President of Kia. Yes, thank you, Olivia. I would like to come back to Jan's story of earlier on. One of the biggest victims of this machine was Eric Schmidt, the former director of Google. So he was filmed, and that was on the social networks. And I think what happened, you know, is relevant. More than one French person out of two sees AI as a threat. And it's not just a French phenomenon. 44% of young American employees recognize that they have sabotaged AI deployment in their companies. So what are they saying to us? They're saying that they don't want to have to put up with this. And I think that this is what we must remember. We will not lead the AI revolution as we proposed without the young people and without, more generally, employees. The vision of the augmented company, as it is put to us, very focused on automation and productivism. Actually, nobody wants this, neither you nor myself. And I think that we must bear in mind that nobody wants this. And we're not obliged to just put up with this reality. And, you know, even if the big techs don't like it, I think that we can see the positive image of the AI. We don't need to just put up with it. And it's the choices that we make today that will allow us to engage in this future. I would like to come back to the fact that the DGCSE does BP and AA did not have to go away with Anthropic. They made the choice of creating Mistral. I think that people making choices today that will allow us to control the future and to fashion it as we want. So how do we go about this? Well, yes, there are two types of optimism. Yes, there's one of the how we get there, and the other is the objective. The objective is we're going to get there, and the pathway is we will get how we get about that. And I think that the psychologists will say that there are pessimists with an objective. So we're convinced that it won't work, but meanwhile we've learned a lot. I think that what is really important is to come back to an optimism with an objective. I think that we will get there, but however, there's a certain pessimism or realism with regard to how we get there. I think that reality will be more complicated. So it's in thinking about the company that we want to have and to put together the way to get there that we will manage this. But this leads to something that's rather complicated and unsettling, which is quite uncomfortable, is that most companies today that use AI today do it with organizations that are dysfunctional. They do it, they want to optimize processes and that today are poorly designed, or at least poorly designed with regard to tech, with data that is not reliable, with organization that is very cemented, whereas AI must be transversal. So if I had one tip to give to the managers, the fact that this reality leads to a disengagement of the employees, if I had one tip to give the managers is they know exactly how the work must be done in their companies. Do they know where the added value is truly produced from an operational point of view? And are they reassured that they have employees that perceive the associated benefit and want to stand by their side in the movement engaged? So I think that to conclude, if we want to do away with this vision of platforms that are given to us, the first is that the challenge of AI is no longer technological. It is deeply organizational, deeply human, deeply transformational, and we will do nothing without employees from that point of view. And the second point, as a company with a mission and an optimist by nature, is that there's a desirable economy with AI. It exists. The only thing is that we need to look after it and invent the model that goes with it. Thank you, Arnaud, and we'll come back to all of these points in a moment. And you can give him a round of applause. Yes, thank you. François Robinet, over to you. Yes, hello, everybody. AI and ChatGPT. We invest in technological companies, small or large, at different points of their development in the States and in Europe. And so we see AI from two points of view. From the points of view in companies that we invest in, which are in the AI sector, and from the point of view investors of our funds, some of which are big companies, which themselves have questions around transformation and who are AI users. And what strikes me today is the gap between the wow moment when, when we all discovered ChatGPT, what happened, and the promises that came after, and what we see in our daily lives, in our personal lives, in our societies, with a big S, and in our companies. And this gap between the promise and real life. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And the timing, and at what point will reality catch up with the promises? So we're in a situation that we're quite familiar with in innovation, which is the fact that we, the markets, investors, users, tend to underestimate the long-term impacts, short-term impacts. So I'm going to start again. We tend to underestimate the short-term impacts and overestimate the long-term impacts. We underestimate what will happen in the 6 coming months, and we overestimate massively what can happen in the 10 coming years. And we have a case study that gives us a lot of information about AI. There were some small differences that I'll come back to, and that is the last major transformational innovation which was last center, and that was the creation of internet, which had an impact on society, companies, and our lives. Which was relatively massive. Internet came along in the middle of the 90s. It came out of the labs. It came into the public domain. And there was this wow effect. Oh, we're going to do so much. We're going to do online trade, online transactions, online health. And these promises were the second part of the 90s. And then all of a sudden, we invested a lot. And, the shares shot up, and it was the 2000 bubble that then burst. And then a little bit later on, we did online trade. Amazon started selling books and then a bit of everything. And there are online transactions, online banks. We do a lot of things online. And then there was what we could not imagine at the time, mobile internet. There was the iPhone that was created. And it was much more than we thought it would be at the time. So I think that this experience can tell us a lot about what will happen and the timing with AI. But of course, there's a bit of a downer, because the friction that we can see on the adoption of AI are more or less the same frictions that were there at the time. We're not going to go into detail because we don't have the time. But this friction, where the business models that are still unstable, we don't know how long the X or Y model will be valid. I'm not talking about Trump's intervention and his threat to withdraw them, but I'm talking about the decision of companies to switch from one model to the other without forewarning. And then there are American companies that have blown their budget in just a few months and lost their license. So the instability of business models, which prevent investments. And the second thing is that companies do not always know, what to do with AI and, how to manage it. And so there was a study of MIT that was published recently that said that less than 10% of the budgets allocated to AI produce real profitability. And the third obstacle, as Jan was saying, are the non-technological barriers and the irrational fears, but some which are very rational fears. And so today a young lawyer or a young developer, I'm not sure that they're very enthusiastic about moving from fiction to reality. There's two differences with internet, and I will stop there. The first is that the amounts allocated are far greater, 100 or so, 1,000 or so last year, more this year. We can imagine that all of this money will produce the fruit more quickly and have a faster impact. Therefore, the short-term overestimation and long-term underestimation. And then there's what Clara said. It is that the adoption is already there, as Clara said, and it's there because we have everything we need for AI. We have computers, we have iPhones, companies have their networks, and whereas for internet, people had to start by buying a computer, and that took a long time to equip households with what they needed so that companies have the appropriate networks. Today, the investment needs are not with the users, they're with the diffusers. They're massive, but they're far more effective and far more short-term. So the adoption, the 100 million users of ChatGPT in just 2.5 months, we didn't see this on internet, which means that this short-term underestimation will be more short-term. Thank you. This is just to stick to time and to above all allow the debate to happen between you five so that we can pass the floor to the public. So we have Barbara, who is the head of masterclass. Over to you.
En fait, je vais reprendre un peu tout ce qui est.
Actually, I will take a little of everything that has been said and mix it. So first of all, I agree. Each time we experience technological change, then there are many promises, but also questions, doubts, and fears. And I've supported many transformations: the arrival of euro, the rise of e-commerce, and the scaling up of the systems. And every time there were questions. We all, consumers, MasterCard has 3.5 billion cards in the world, so each time you have gotten a new card, obviously you have wondered if you could trust this technology. But that's the question we raised today with AI. Can we trust AI? Because technological transformation can lead to economic transformation. Because technology is powerful. There have been powerful technologies, but the real transformation is having men and women trust technology. Then we move away from imagining the future to using technology, which means we trust technology. And MasterCard has tried to build trust for a long time. We are an international payment network, which only objective is to build trust. Imagine 3.5 billion consumers, 260 million consumers who don't know each other and who at some point decide to trust each other and to make transactions happen. So that's our job. So we know the concept of trust very well. So we must build safety, and we've done it before with new technologies, just like with the tokenization of payment. And we work based on ecosystem, which means that we work with the whole ecosystem to create an AI technology we can trust. And we want this AI-based technology to be strong, just like European citizens. So we've been in France for 60 years with over 9,000 employees in Europe, and our only target is to reach a payment system that is resilient. Here's a few figures. 45% of consumers for Black Friday and Cyber Monday have already made a search on an AI-based engine. So 45% in 5 European countries have already used AI to make their research. And we want to get agentic trade and commerce. Have you heard about it? Well, it is about an agent that will manage a payment, which means that the consumer delegates the payment. The consumer, the agent will search for the product. For example, the consumer said, I need a bicycle for my 5-year-old. The agent will make the search and the payment that is being delegated. So there will be identity being controlled as for each payment today, and then we will check the purchase intention. So as you can see, we are building a new system, and many market standards will help us standardize the use of this model that we want to be ethical, and that's really important. We were among the first signatories of the EU AI Act. Consequently, we know that ethics is crucial, and these tools must be used for the consumer's good. Thank you very much, Barbara. You mentioned a word that was really present in your intervention. You mentioned ethics and trust. Clara Chapas, can you comment on this? Beyond language, beyond the overarching topic of trust, how can we ensure trust? That is a really interesting question. I am delighted we all share in the same session. During the previous technological revolution, that is internet, we adopted technology because we had to, because we wanted everything to, we wanted performance, we wanted a tool to do A, and the tool did A. And I found the example of MasterCard really interesting because behind the question of trust, there's a role of government and the question of power. Nowadays, it is not enough to trust others anymore. And 90% of payments depend on the American infrastructure. Many of the cloud market depend on American infrastructure, and this goes for all previous technological revolution. But if we really want to build trust, we need to bear a power, which means that beyond all the rules being respected by foreign companies, there's another question, and the role of the government is crucial. The question is, we want to trust, so we will create our own solutions. So not only will we build trust by using tools, we will use our own tools, the one we created. And now I will go back to the target-based pessimism. We can implement diplomatic measures. We want sovereignty. So it doesn't mean that we want an AI-based value chain that is 100% French. No, we want to work with our partners because we choose to. We choose to be dependent. We choose our dependencies, and we choose the way we build our technology so we can be more resilient. So let's go back to this target-based pessimism. That's something that is really hard to change here, and it is culture. You mentioned the US. Many American entrepreneurs wake up wondering if they're capable of doing it. So we need to trust ourselves more so that consumers and citizens can trust us to do more. It's like football, and the French football team has shown all its talent. We're all proud of them today, and when we look at them, we might wonder, will they win the World Cup? But if we wonder, then why go there in the end? Well, it's the same for entrepreneurs. It is easier to be a target-based optimist. We must say we can do it because we have a nuclear decarbonated energy that can help us build powerful tools, and we've got a corporate ecosystem that is strong, that will help us go beyond and fight our dependencies. So let's trust ourselves. Barbara, do you want to comment? So I will not make any comments on football. As an Italian citizen, there's nothing to say on that topic, unfortunately. However, as an Italian citizen from the Erasmus generation, I'm 100% okay. Resilience is crucial. So which actors will invest to build a system that is well functioning and that will protect the final consumer? To me, this is the only important question, even before geopolitics, because the ultimate tool, the ultimate question is to find out who's going to do what for the ecosystem. Arnaud, you will have the opportunity to comment on this. What about trust? Can we trust nowadays speeches and rhetoric saying that AI will solve all our productivity issues, there will be better ROI, the companies will do better thanks to AI? There's a discussion going on within companies. It is full of enthusiasm, but also of concerns. So I do think that's an issue. And do you think that AI will resolve all the issues faced by companies? The answer is within the question. The answer is no. Many say the contrary. Of course, then you can say everything you want, but then there's reality. 18 months ago, we started working about AI. We were wondering models would work, and we published a study which showed that many people already see that it is an issue, but for most people it is an issue about transformation and technology. So will it solve the issue of productivity? I do not think so. But let's go back to trust. I spent many time in companies. we all have our companies, our collaborators. You mentioned trusting each other. We must trust our employees because employees are the ones who know how AI is going to help them. However, if you focus on productivity, that more productivity means less job, then we will not make it. Will there be a rise in productivity for some profession thanks to the AI? I do think so. We do have statistics on this point. There will be IT development will be affected, and the call center world will be strongly affected too. I do think that one profession in A will be affected. It's not like all jobs will be affected, but we will have an impact. But we trust ourselves, we trust our assets, and we find a way to use AI to support our company's performance. And for countries that want performance, then AI is more an opportunity than an asset. But we should stop scaremongering, saying that AI will write productivity better than employees. This is a mistake. Do you agree? Do you think it is a mistake to think that AI will merely be a productivity lever? AI does fuel productivity, but it's not in conflict with employment. I said it was really important to manage an energy-producing infrastructure. If we wanted to do the same with human beings, the cost of connecting a TV to a platform, the cost will make the operation impossible. Like, we wouldn't be able to operate this asset or this device, so there wouldn't be any benefits. But nowadays, we have AI agents. They do not replace the human being within companies, but they were fueled, transformed by a human being, and they create new uses. They can also contribute to energy efficiency that is much needed everywhere for all the right causes we talked about. What do you think about companies nowadays and companies in the future? How do you think the companies will be transformed by AI? You've been supporting many companies. So what will companies look like in 10 years after the impact of AI? Is it a dream or a nightmare? To me, company will be hybrid because obviously AI will not replace human beings, because we will always need human beings at different steps of the value chain to control what's going on. There are various types of processes. There will be a rise of agents penetration, but it will be complemented by men and women who are part of the organization and who must be the powerhouses of the company. We cannot impose AI on employees. We do not start by our business targets when we recruit human beings to create agents. This will be a disaster, and there will be a zero rate of adoption of AI. When you listen to Valerio, and we understand, but there are sectors of the global economy that are being affected by AI because AI isn't regulated and comes and undermines the business methods. Is it the new reality? Does it mean that there is a major part of the economy that could disappear tomorrow? Yes, the economy will change, it will be transformed. But we need to have trust. We need to trust companies. They can evolve and change. For example, the internet has changed many things, but generally speaking, companies have created new jobs with new professions being created, new ways of working being invented. And generally speaking, society has changed for the better. However, there have been profound transformations. Then there's the example of MasterCard providing a new service to customer with AI. But as I said before, there are a company that have a real ROI effect. So should you give ChatGPT to all your employees? It is a good thing. It can help employees understand what AI is, can help them get familiar with it, but it doesn't really transform companies. There might be a more efficient marketing policy, but the company will not be transformed. But companies who transform rapidly through AI, they are companies that integrate AI, that will reshape their data management, who they integrate the data through infrastructures in a native environment. And here is an example to show you that we must not be naive. We must remain open to new discoveries. I went to have a tour of a startup that had signed a contract for a huge automotive player. It is not a French one, and it was working on robotics. There is a use case, which helped employees of this company based in Gand. So employees were doing assembling, and they had a glove that would actually sense their hands' movement and mimic them. And at the other end of the chain, there is an AI device that will mimic and learn the movement. And in a few weeks, the AI robot learned to do the same thing, the same gestures. So what these employees do today will be done by a robot in 2 years. So I don't know if the employees actually trusted the robot, but the robot learned by mimicking employees. And this shows there will soon be a challenge to be taken on by many companies. Many companies will be disrupted, so we need to trust we will create something else. I told you we needed to trust ourselves, but you're not convinced because you didn't take European companies as examples. No, they're not European. You mentioned ChatGPT and Claude to integrate in our companies. We have 10 minutes left. Is there a microphone around? Here's a question. Please be brief. We have 8 minutes left. Good afternoon. I have a question for Barbara. I am a consumer of MasterCard, and 1 year ago, the US government imposed sanctions on international judges that couldn't make any payment, including through MasterCard. So as a consumer, how can I trust in a company that satisfies the interest of a foreign power? This is a great question. Just as a reminder, the whole financial world has to respect rules, and MasterCard isn't any exceptions. So we are among the 210. We are in 210 bays. We respect the rules of the 210 bays, and there's a decision taken by one country, then a MasterCard, and the bank must respect this decision. And it is a difficult situation, but we must abide by the laws. Thank you. Here's another question. Thank you very much for your intervention. I have a question about the AC. I see in each lecture room, I really don't like it because we're promoting specific topics, and I don't understand why we're using these devices, and I think everybody understands. Today I'd like to talk about culture. We talked about transformation extensively, but today, if we don't treat a human bias, then an AI agent will industrialize this bias in the future. So are there any examples that can show that culture beyond the human dimension is being considered in the adoption of AI? As for culture, for years we thought this is something we had to endure once we solved all our issues. And nowadays we work on culture. But culture have soft and hard aspects. And as for what François said, the first thing you must do if you want culture to change, you need to change processes. You need to change organizational processes. You must reorganize them through a native technological aspect. You cannot just impose an AI dimension to existing practices. And then we can trust each other to adopt. But right now, there will be an obligation to optimize processes that are not adapted to AI procedures. So people will be asked to ask processes and practices that they're not used to. But unfortunately, in 40% of the companies we work with, it is the reality. But fortunately, there are many SMEs in France, but the level of data is insufficient to be able to take advantage of AI, of the benefits of AI. So technology will change things. We can change the situation. And we see that some professions can take ownership of technology through AI. But there's defiance because we ask people to adopt AI on processes that are not adequate to these new realities. And that must be our starting point. And just a last example, just to clarify, in a good company of liquors, the transformation processing head, the head of processing, said that she reshaped processes and systems. They went back to the SAP so they could have good basis to adopt AI. So when they raised the question of AI, they realized that they couldn't adopt it. They couldn't ask their employees to change their culture because it didn't make sense. They couldn't adopt AI on all processes. So there's a double aspect of culture that we must not forget. We have 2 minutes left. AI is a technology. It is quite difficult not to mention proprietary matters, but the ownership of AI is limited to a handful of powerful people, so that who threaten democracy. Is it still possible to regulate AI? Clara, over to you. Thank you. I do think it is one of the most important challenges as for power. We're seeing that there's a limited number of companies that capture a big share of the value of AI, and there's also a challenge in terms of power. And I do agree that Europe is fragmented with 27 different states. The president held a speech in Davos. He mentioned in Europe that was too slow at times, but he also mentioned a European asset. We are 450 million European citizens, which is a strength. We are powerful and strong enough to dictate the rules we want to work on the market with, independently of the value of the company involved. And this rule is here, is in place in the real world. This is a common rule to show how we want to live with. And the same way you import a Chinese car in France, this Chinese car must have the will and must abide by the same safety rule. Well, the same goes for technology. But let's go back to the judge and the sanctions and the question you asked to Mastercard. What happened to that man? He had to use his own credit card. Some of you may still have such a basic credit card. And we realized the situation. We see the extent of the situation thanks to the story of the judge. We do not want to be at the hands of these powerful companies, so we need our own solutions. And the question of autonomy and strategic autonomy in the digital age is crucial. And the story of the judge shows that we are subjected to external decisions, to external laws, and we don't know, we're out of our debt. So we do not want new startup because it's good and because many entrepreneurs will come here and say interesting things. No, we want innovation because innovation raises one single question: are we able to get our own decisions and to develop our own tools? So we live in a world of powerful people, so we need to be powerful ourselves. And this means having our own players. Nobody says that Europe cannot be strong nor resilient. I will not mention all the investments, but what is crucial is that we must have a choice. And the consumer's choice is crucial, and there are other ways, means of payment. And what matters is that the means of payment you use works, protects you and your data. That is the main target, a MasterCard. Thank you very much, Jan. A word of conclusion. You have 1 minute left. First of all, I'd like to thank all the panelists that gave us sources of hope. The first thing I'd say is that the transformation will not happen without employees, without young people. And we see it in the economy with the so-called gray productivity. Human beings do not want to be replaced by AI, so employees don't use AI when it undermines their priorities. So we need engagement. And secondly, everything depends on our choices and on sovereignty. And many companies refuse to be controlled by foreign powers. And if you see the current cost of the token, it might be really profitable to use ChatGPT everywhere. But if the token price is multiplied by 10 and you don't have any other choice, you're like a prisoner, then the situation is different. So we need to get our European and French sovereignty back. And to comment on the story told at the beginning in Erich Schmidt, that was booed. And I hope that at the end of this session there will be no booing, but rather applause. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.